Hey guys, it's Luca from Learning MTG, and today I wanted to make a video talking about Bitcoin. Apologies if the mic is not really loud enough. I got a new computer, so I don't know. It may be kind of soft, the audio. I'm not able to kind of fix it yet. Um, and also, I'm kind of sick, so I may be coughing throughout the video. But, anyways, I wanted to talk about Bitcoin. So, I sent this email to my parents in May 22nd, so about 5 months ago. Um, Basically, I was kind of begging them to buy Bitcoin. Um, and I outlined, as best I could, my position on it, like why I think Bitcoin is such a great investment. I'd also talked to them many times over dinner about Bitcoin. And in the very beginning, my dad basically saw Bitcoin as a complete scam, and he thought Bitcoin was going to go to zero. Um, and maybe it still will. Who knows? Anything's possible, right? But um, and I think I made another video too on this channel where I talked about the differences in opinion of me and my dad on Bitcoin. But I wanted to read this email. Um, Basically, was my kind of argument to my parents of why I thought they should buy Bitcoin. Before I go into this, I want to say that I'm very careful about giving investment advice, right? So one of the things, maybe the thing that I'm most passionate about in my life right now is investing. I love investing. I love to think about investing. Um, and I naturally want to give people investment advice, right? Like I see all these great investments and my natural inclination is to tell people to do similar things like, hey, I'm making money doing this. I want other people to make money doing the same thing. But it's difficult to give someone investment advice. Um, you know, if you give someone bad advice about maybe their diet, or maybe you give them bad advice about how to paint their bathroom, or certain things, you can only do so much damage. You can only, maybe they'll feel sick for a couple weeks and then stop doing it, or maybe their bathroom will look like crap, and they'll have to deal with that. But if you give someone bad investment advice, you can make them lose a lot of their money, a lot of their savings that they've saved up for many years. So it's kind of a high stakes thing to give people advice about. One of the things that people don't realize is with investing, it's not a simple thing. Um, People may try to make it simple. People may try to simplify it, but that's just because they need to simplify it. In reality, investing is very complicated, like anything in life, um, and so you can't just tell someone, hey, do X, Y, Z, right? So, for example, when I'm investing, every day I'm gathering new information and updating my decisions based on that new information that comes in. I may change the sizes of my position. I may completely dump a position. I may get into something that I thought was a bad investment one day. The next day it could become a good investment if new information comes in, or if I start to analyze information in a new way, or if I start to see the world in a new way. So, it's never as simple as like, hey, I think you should buy Bitcoin, right? Because then basically every moment of every day, once they've bought Bitcoin, they're in the trade, and when do you sell it? What do you do if the price goes way down? What do you do if the price goes way up? How do you manage your emotions? How do you change the size of your position based on other things you're investing, or even other things that are going on in your life, right? Like, if you're making a lot of income, um, it's like, let's say you're making 10 grand a month or whatever is coming in, then investing 10 grand into Bitcoin is not such a big deal. You're basically highly diversified because you have a lot of cash coming in from another source, right? So the way you are diversified is affected by things like how much income you make, how much your house is worth, all sorts of different things, how much other investments you have. And as those things change, the way you invest should also change. So, to make a long story short, basically investing is a very complex thing. You can't just give someone, I mean, you can give someone cookie cutter advice, but let's say you tell someone to buy Bitcoin because you think it's going to be worth more in 10 years, but you think it's highly volatile. So tomorrow it could go down 50%. but you don't communicate that properly, and they lose they lose a bunch of money because they buy it, it goes down, they sell it immediately, right? So that's why I like to avoid giving investment advice when possible, even with family. But I think that Bitcoin is such an amazing trade that I basically kind of begging my parents to take a closer look. And I do want to make a video, and but with these kind of warnings ahead of time, like, hey, be very careful about taking investment advice from anyone, including me. So I'm gonna read this email. Hi, Mom and Appa. So Appa is what I call my dad, because those of you who don't know, my dad is Indian. I just wanted to advise you guys to buy some Bitcoin right now. I know Appa feels that it will eventually be worthless, but I like to make my case below. I believe that it's extremely likely that Bitcoin is a highly disruptive technology that will change the course of the world. If this is the case, then it will pay off incredibly to get in before the rest of the world catches on. There's a story of someone who bought a pizza for 5,000 Bitcoin in 2010. A few weeks ago, you could buy 5,000 pizzas with 1 Bitcoin. From a purely mathematical calculation, that is a 25 million-fold increase over the course of a decade, and I think it begs for further inspection and consideration. There may be something very special going on here. Bitcoin is the soundest money that has ever been created. The only caveat is that, one, enough people need to agree to use it as opposed to another system of money, and two, governments don't choose to ban it. The reason it's the soundest money ever created is that it's decentralized and has a fixed, finite supply. We've never had a similar system before. Fiat currencies can be printed according to the needs of governments, thereby debasing the value. Even commodities like gold can be mined, and so therefore do not have a fixed supply. Bitcoin is also digital, so it has advantages that come along with that, like programmable, like being programmable and easily moved across the world. So let me go over a little bit before I finish this. One, Bitcoin has appreciated so much over a fairly lengthy, over a decade. I don't think you can really find another asset like that in the history of mankind. So, I think it begs like further investigation. Maybe there's something special going on here. Maybe this isn't just a scam. Maybe this isn't just a flash in the pan. So that's one thing. And I can make the argument, the explanation for why it's gone up so much. Because if you do believe that Bitcoin will be the next, main monetary system for humankind, then it necessarily has to go from being worth almost nothing to being worth hundreds of trillions of dollars, right? And so it needs to appreciate in value very quickly over a short period of time. Over 20, 30 years, it needs to increase by, billionfold or trillionfold or whatever. I haven't done the exact math, but it needs to increase by that much. So it needs to grow extremely quickly if this is true, if it will become the next monetary system. One of the big things that you end up learning when you study Bitcoin is like how much fiat currencies are kind of debilitating to people, to economies, to countries, to the world, to humankind. You don't really realize it. So when you do something every day, when you do something on a regular basis, you kind of take it for granted. Like I remember this one guy that I love listening to, David Mills. I think he said something like, the fish isn't aware of water. The fish lives in water. It's such a normal part of its existence that it doesn't even realize the water is there. Right? It's kind of taken for granted. In the same way we kind of take for granted like using dollars. Really the main issue with using dollars or any other currency that's created by a government is that they can print more of it, right? So normally I think in the US they print maybe 3% of the money system, 5%, let's say 5%, right? So that's not that's still pretty devastating, if your money at the end of the year is worth 5% less than it was at the beginning of the year. But you can get by. In 2020, because of the coronavirus, they increased the money supply by 40%. And why is that a big deal? That is a big deal because let's say, I think most people at the beginning of 2020, at the end of 2020, were making the same income, right? I do tutoring on the side. I'm still charging $40-$50 an hour for my tutoring. If I was like, hey, the money supply increased by 40%, you really should be paying me, 60, 70, $80 an hour. People would be like, get the fuck out of here. They'd be like, what are you talking about? So I'm really in real value, and real value means like what I can really purchase with my money. I'm really doing the exact same work a year later. I haven't done anything wrong. and yet I'm making 40% less money, or whatever the math ends up being. Increasing the money supply by 40% doesn't mean you're making 40% less, but whatever it is, if I'm making 50% less or 30% less or whatever. So that's kind of really insidious. The government can print more money, and if I don't, increase, what I'm getting paid, or if prices kind of stay the same, then all of a sudden I'm kind of like a lot poorer, just because the government's printing money. And maybe I'm benefiting from the government printing money. Maybe that money is going into making society better in many ways. Um, and also, if I own assets that are appreciating in value due to the printing of money. But this is like the key idea of Bitcoin, right? So, like, anyone who is really into Bitcoin, this is their cornerstone argument for Bitcoin, which is that fiat currencies are just kind of debilitating, because you don't have control over how much of it is printed, right? And as more of it's printed, or even if they somehow destroyed a bunch of it, the value of it changed. Like, if they destroyed half the dollars in circulation somehow, your dollars are worth twice as much, theoretically. And if they double the supply of dollars, your dollar, so it's like way outside your control, right? So if you've got money under your bed, or if you've got a fixed wage, um, or if you own an annuity, or if you've got a deal with someone that they're going to pay you $500 a month to do a certain job, you're really losing value as they print dollars. So that's kind of the big idea of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is basically guaranteed by its programming to have a fixed supply. So you can't make any more Bitcoin. So, Michael Saylor basically talks about you can think of it in terms of like an energy system, and energy is leaking out of the system as more money is created in a fiat system. Whereas in Bitcoin, there's no like leakage of energy. All the energy that you put into Bitcoin, if you use it as like a savings platform, for example, none of that energy is getting leaked out, because no new Bitcoin is being created. There's a lot of nuance to this. Effectively, there's no new Bitcoin being created. Okay, so let me read the rest of this email. So, in life, it pays to properly prioritize what you give attention to. If you are willing to work thousands of hours to make money, you should be willing to spend a dozen hours researching something that could affect your savings on a percentage-wise basis. I can provide resources for you guys. For example, this series is amazing. So this is a series by Robert Breedlove and Michael Saylor, where they basically talk about Bitcoin, which I highly recommend. If the Bitcoin theory is correct, the US dollar will continue to debase at a steady rate. There will be steady inflation. Everything denominated in dollars or priced in future cash flows of dollars will lose tremendous portion of its value. Money will flock to Bitcoin. Right now, there's a lot of fear in the market, and negative sentiment seems to be at a relative high. So I think the price of Bitcoin will be depressed for the next month or so, and it will therefore be a good time to buy. So where were we? So I sent this in May. So we were basically like here. The price had reached new all-time highs in April, and by May it had lost about 50% of its value. And I said, hey, I think now is a good time to buy. So it turned out to be kind of correct, but who knows? Anything can happen. But this is a big thing that I think about a lot. Is like, you want to prioritize things properly in your life. I'll just use happiness for example. In my opinion, if you care about being happy, and you probably do, probably a lot of the things you do in your life, you do in an effort to make yourself happy, then you want to really prioritize the things that will make you most happy, which is, in my opinion, like meditation, like being able to just chill out, being able to go through life without needing lots of stuff, as opposed to, filling up your happiness with material stuff or with other stuff, drugs, alcohol, whatever. So similarly, if you're putting a lot of effort in your life into making money, you want to really think about investing money, because the bang for your buck is going to be quite high. If you can change your investing from an investing strategy that makes you 10% a year to an investing strategy that makes you 50 to 100% a year, which is kind of what Bitcoin has done over the past decade, that's going to be huge for you. and it could take you maybe 100 hours of research to figure this stuff out. Whereas if you wanted to make twice as much money by receiving a higher salary or getting a new job, it would take a lot more effort. So the bang for the buck is quite high, in my opinion, in looking into different investment ideas. And I think a lot of people kind of shoot themselves in the foot by not properly investigating different investing opportunities. So basically telling my parents, like, hey, you really should spend the time to learn about this. It could be huge. And even if it's not, if there's some chance of it being huge, it's still time very well spent. Okay. I think that the nature of investing is that the majority of your returns over the course of a lifetime will come from a handful of decisions. That's kind of like the Warren Buffett advice, If Warren Buffett said something along the lines of, if you told someone they could only make 5 investments for the rest of their life, they would make those 5 investments very carefully, and they would make 5 very wisely researched decisions. And it turns out over the course of someone's lifetime, the majority of the money that they make from investing, it comes from a few very good investments. So the idea being that 5, maybe like 10 mediocre investments will make you what one fantastic investment will make you. So it's really like heavily weighted towards the high side. So you really don't want to miss out on huge opportunities, which I think Bitcoin is. And then finally, I close with, I know you guys tend to be defensive and risk averse, and I think Bitcoin is perfect for someone of this mindset. Bitcoin succeeds if the current system fails, and fails if the current system succeeds. So a small portion of a portfolio allocated to Bitcoin can be viewed as an insurance policy, which is kind of what Chamath, I forget how to say his last name, but he's basically an entrepreneur investor who he views Bitcoin as kind of like an insurance policy. The idea is if fiat currencies collapse, which they tend to all collapse, and the dollar seems to be, on pace to collapsing very quickly. Maybe it could take 10 years for the dollar to completely collapse. Then Bitcoin is your kind of your way out. And if the dollar is perfectly pristine, it works perfectly, there's no issues with the dollar, then Bitcoin is not very useful, right? Why would I need Bitcoin if dollars work just fine? So, in investing, we call these like inversely correlated assets. And so if you have 2 assets that are kind of very well inversely correlated to each other, then it'll diversify your portfolio if you're all about avoiding risk, which my parents are. And most people are. I personally don't really care that much about risk. But so what ended up happening, my parents did end up buying Bitcoin. I think they might have put maybe like 2%-ish of their portfolio into crypto. My dad split it up between Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Cardano, I believe. In my opinion, I don't think Cardano is a great investment. I mean, I'm not a huge expert on these, on all the crypto, right? But I don't think Cardano is amazing. A lot of really intelligent people are, invested in Ethereum, but I also think Ethereum is kind of risky for various reasons. So personally, I think Bitcoin is the way to go. I think my portfolio right now is like my crypto is like 90% Bitcoin, 5% Solana, 5% Polygon. But I think 100% Bitcoin is basically what I would suggest to people. Because it's very low risk relative to the other crypto, because it's kind of gained its escape velocity, right? So, one of the key themes of investing over the past decade has been investing in things that gain a network effect, gain kind of a monopoly. You could think of Google, right? So if you're going to search for something, you're just going to use Google. Bing is pretty irrelevant, and that's like the next best one. Once it builds up that network, then it's very difficult for competitors to deal with that, and it just can accrue a ton of value. Facebook's another example. Who cares about MySpace if everyone's on Facebook? It's difficult to create another Facebook and compete with Facebook. Similarly, Amazon, who's going to make another Amazon? You can't. You just can't compete with it because it gains so much adoption that, and so many businesses and so many buyers and customers are all in that one place that you can't just make a new marketplace. You have to basically start from scratch, and it's near impossible. So Bitcoin is kind of working along those same lines of, you're building a new monetary system. It's got to get high adoption, and there's going to be one winner, really. You know, there's not going to be like two different monetary systems in this way, in my opinion. So it's really just which one can get that critical mass. And Bitcoin's already at $1 trillion market cap. So, I could be wrong, but basically the prevailing wisdom is that it's reached that escape velocity, and there's not going to be another competitor to Bitcoin because it's just kind of like too late. It's already won enough market share that it can't be outcompeted. In the same way that Facebook has, Google has, Amazon has, so on and so forth. Okay. Is there anything else I want to talk about? Yeah. So basically, I think Bitcoin is really going to change the world. Kind of like what I mentioned. There's a big issue with fiat currency that a lot of people don't realize, just because it's such a part of our lives, such a daily part of our lives, that we don't realize a lot of the huge issues with fiat currency. And so I think for the first time in mankind, we've invented a system of money that does not have this energy leakage, that basically can't be manipulated by some kind of central authority. It's decentralized. Effectively, no one controls Bitcoin, so no one can print more Bitcoin, and that just makes it a very powerful system that we haven't seen yet. Um, it will see a lot of opposition because basically, anyone who's gaining off of the old system of money, which would be, central bankers or people that are close to the central bankers, they're not going to like Bitcoin. They're going to lose a lot of that profit that they would be making from printing money, and so they're going to oppose Bitcoin. And it'll be interesting to see what happens, but I think, and most people who are into Bitcoin really think, that it's just too late. You can't kill Bitcoin. Um, it's seeing adoption all over the world. Places like India, Nigeria, um, South America, obviously Europe and the US, it's just kind of proliferating at such a rate, it's going to be difficult to kill. In the same way that the internet proliferated at such a high rate that, even though whoever lost a bunch of money by the invention of the internet, I don't know who, maybe, television, media, or something of the like, they couldn't really stop it because it's everywhere. How do you stop the internet now? It's too late, and I think Bitcoin's kind of the same. But yeah, so I just want to make this video. Basically, I gave my parents the advice to buy Bitcoin, and I don't like giving people investment advice, so I've really only given this advice to people I'm very close to, which has been family. But yeah, I've told many of my family members that I think this is what to do. I personally put all of my free cash, all of my savings into Bitcoin that aren't in Magic Cards, um, except for a little bit in some other altcoins. And yeah, we'll see how it works out. But I think it is going to be kind of really a new technology that completely changes the world, and I think in a very good way. I think a lot of the problems that we have in society today are due to kind of centralized control where people have different incentives than others. So there's someone at the Federal Reserve who is incentivized to print more money, even though it makes the average American way worse off, especially the poorest Americans. So the poorer you are, the more you lose by money being printed because you're living paycheck to paycheck, you don't own assets, right? So if they increase the money supply by 40%, but I own a bunch of real estate, or I own a bunch of the stock market, or I own a bunch of Magic Cards or a bunch of Bitcoin, I'll be okay because it'll kind of offset, however much money they print, it'll be kind of offset by my assets going up in price. But if you don't have assets and you're getting a fixed income, then you're really going to be hurt because you're losing a ton of value. You may be getting stimulus checks in the mail, and that may help you, but if you're not using those stimulus checks to better yourself in permanent ways, by maybe learning new skills or by buying assets, you're really just falling farther and farther behind, which people don't kind of understand how that works. So the printing of money creates huge wealth inequality gaps, which I think a lot of people don't realize. People who own assets, they're kind of just net neutral. They lose a little bit, right? Because if you have any kind of business arrangement, um, inflation is just a pain. It's just a pain in the ass, and it does create inefficiencies all throughout the economy. So even rich people do lose out from inflation, but they're kind of they have some cushioning, some protection because they own assets that it will be increasing in value. But for poor people, for people who don't own assets, for people who are living paycheck to paycheck, it's really rough. And you can see this in history over and over and over. This is not a new thing. This has been happening for, I think, literally thousands of years. I think this sort of thing was happening in the Roman Empire. So none of this is new. It's very cyclical in nature. Every fiat currency eventually kind of implodes, and the dollar is definitely on pace to implode very quickly. But now we've got this new technology, Bitcoin, which may give some reprieve from that implosion. So yeah, I don't want to ramble on too much, but those are kind of my thoughts on Bitcoin. I gave my parents advice to buy it, and they did end up buying it. And I would give anyone advice to buy it. You'd have to, you have to do your own research, come to your own conclusions, and have a strategy for when are you going to buy it, how much are you going to buy, what percentage of your portfolio are you going to have, how are you going to sell it, when are you going to sell it, all that kind of stuff, right? So it's not such a simple decision, but I think, I give this advice to anyone that I really care about. I think it can be a life-changing decision. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.